Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Off the Dome Sports Podcast. The crew of the Off the Dome Sports Podcast here with Mock Draft Monday 2.0. I am Redfish.
I'm Rebo Hustle.
And I'm Mustang.
And we will be mocking and dealing today. I don't know why he screamed into the mic like that. That was awesome. Mock Draft Monday. Mock Draft Monday 2.0. 1.0 was released last Monday. Last time we did a what would we do from that spot draft, and we started with me and went down the line. Today we're switching it up a little bit. We're going predictive. So rather than what you would do, what you think would actually happen in this spot, based on rumors you may have heard, based on the team need, stuff like that. And then we're going to switch up the order. Rebo Hustle over here was very, very sure that he wanted the 12th pick. So we'll see what he does there. So we're going to start with Mustang down there and then go to me, and Rebo will pick at the intervals of 3. Before we get started, make sure to follow us on the X, the artist formerly known as Twitter, _Dome Pod. If you're watching it, it's probably on YouTube. If you're not, go ahead, like, comment, subscribe to the YouTube channel, Off the Dome Sports Podcast, as well as Spotify. And then, of course, make sure to follow the No Network, where new content's coming out all the time. Louisiana-based sports podcast, so make sure to check out the No, Kneux. It's the only way to spell it. Saints, LSU, Pelicans, wrestling, anything you could possibly think of. Not only Louisiana sports, but national sports as well. The No has it going on. So make sure to check out the No Network. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get started on Mock Draft Monday 2.0. Mustang, take it away with pick 1.
Hey, how you doing? First pick of the draft, Bears got it. Pretty chalk pick in my opinion. I mean, you trade away your quarterback, drafted him thinking he'd be the future. Didn't pan out the way you wanted him to. Also went through a bunch of changes on the Bears, so I think they're starting to figure out their offense finally, and I think they see their future in Caleb Williams.
Williams?
Yeah, got him a bunch of assets over this offseason. Has a pretty dangerous receiving core.
Yep. DJ Moore still there. Keenan Allen got added through a very late round draft pick trade, so they didn't have to give up much to get an all-pro receiver. Add DeAndre Swift in the backfield. Bears could be dangerous with that number 1 pick. For my pick, I'm going Jaden Daniels. It's really either him or Drake May. The reason I go Jaden is because that spread offense, Jaden Daniels, great improvement from year 1 to year 2 at LSU. Also had 3 years at Arizona State under his belt in college, so he's an experienced player, can do it in the air, can do it on the ground. I think he's the second best quarterback in this draft, and I think he'll go off the board at number 2.
So the Patriots at 3. Drake May is going to be my pick. Last week we had them trade out of this spot. I just feel like if you're going to trade out and your quarterback is Jacoby Brissett, why not just stick and pick and get one of the top 3 quarterbacks in this draft?
Yeah. And moving on, to me it's really another chalk pick. Marvin Harrison falling to 4. Arizona's need anything and everything, and he's projected to be one of the best receivers, just like his father was. So you want a proven talent, someone is going to make an impact immediately. I think he's that guy for him.
Yeah, great player. For me, here at 5, this is going to be the first trade we do of this draft, because we do have trades. We're trying to be productive, and of course you can't always predict a trade because there's some that happen in the draft that we just couldn't see coming. But this one is one that's been mocked a couple times, and I think it makes sense for both teams. And that's the Chargers trading down with Minnesota. Minnesota locked in that second first-round pick after a trade with the Texans earlier this offseason. And the Chargers are a team who can really use help in a lot of areas. So I think doubling up on first-round picks will help them with their new staff. Jim Harbaugh can really implement his plan. For me, I think the Vikings are going to move up here. I know they're in love with Drake May, but they need a quarterback. Sam Darnold's not going to do it for you. So they go ahead and move up and grab a guy who the Giants here at 6 who reportedly are falling in love with, and that's J.J. McCarthy. I think if Minnesota's going to make a move in this draft, they have to move up into the top 3 if they want Drake May. But if not, fill in here at 5, get your quarterback of the future, see if you can develop him with, Kevin O'Connell calling the plays and Justin Jefferson. They're looking, to get him a contract extension, so he's got a weapon. Let's see what J.J. McCarthy can do in Minnesota.
At 6, the Giants, If you can't get one of the top 4 quarterbacks at the 6th spot, I really think that they'll just run it back with Daniel Jones. And what else would you do if you're going to commit to Daniel Jones other than committing to one of the best receiving prospects in this draft, and Malik Neighbors, a guy that can pretty much do it all, great route runner, amazing downfield speed. We saw the one of the most insane verticals at a pro day of all time. It's a great fit for the Giants. I don't know what else they would do here if they can't get a quarterback.
Yeah, for me, that Giants pick, if they don't take quarterback, it's either Neighbors or Odunze. It's really whoever they like more. Yeah. And we're as LSU fans, of course, we're gonna love Neighbors more. So,
yeah, I think that Giants pick. It's really when it gets to them, it's who's left.
Yep.
Like those top 5 picks are, the Giants are very dependent on those top 5 picks. If a quarterback's still there, they'd probably pull the trigger. But best receiver available, got to get some offensive weapons.
Yeah.
Pretty lackluster offense, and then you trade away your running back. That's what happens. Well, you don't trade away. You just
lose them in free agency, yeah.
But
Tennessee at 7, Mustang.
To Tennessee at 7. Really thought about this one, and to me, I think that they need one player more than the other. To me, that player is Joe Alt. I was kind of debating between Joe Alt and Dallas Turner, but I think the need is more on the offensive side of the ball than the defensive side of the ball for the Titans this year.
Yeah, I mean, if Alt falls to them in real life, number 7, that's a great pick for them. Lose Taylor Lewan a couple years ago. He had a couple down years with his ACLs, and then, ends up leaving the team, and they haven't been able to lock up that left tackle spot since. You get Joe Alt, a guy who's supposed to be one of those generational tackles who you plug and play for the next decade. So if you can get Alt there at 7, you pick it and you forget it. So good move for Tennessee there. At 8, I was down to the top 2 guys you can see here, Odunze and Dallas Turner. A lot of people have them going with Dallas Turner because he fits a lot what the Falcons defense looks for, and what they've done in the past. But I decided to switch it up. In my mind, you get Kirk Cousins, you have Drake London, you sign Darnell Mooney, but Rome Odunze is a different type of receiver. And if you really want that offense to shine, you get that final weapon. You have Bijan Robinson in the backfield, Kirk Cousins throwing passes to Drake London, Rome Odunze, Darnell Mooney, Kyle Pitts. That's a very scary offense to look at. And you don't pass up on, a wide receiver who people see in the same tier as a guy who went at pick 4 and at pick 6. When you're picking in the top 10, you get a playmaker, and Odunze is that guy for Atlanta.
Yeah. And not only is that offense scary, but it's young. Like besides Kirk Cousins, every player on that offense, I feel like is
27 or younger.
Yeah, only 5 or less seasons in the NFL.
Yeah, very young team. I kind of hate that they're in our division because I expect them to take a big step up. We'll see what Atlanta does with that pick, but I like Odunze there.
With the 9th pick, the Bears get their 2nd pick of the draft. It's kind of hard if this is how the board falls for them because they would like to go receiver to shore up that 3rd receiver spot. But if the board falls this way, you just have to go best player available at a position of need, and that's Dallas Turner. You get a guy that can bend, guy that rushes the passer better than 90% of this draft probably, and it never hurts to get another defensive lineman.
Yeah, I mean, Dallas Turner, best player available, first defensive player off the board, and pairing him up with Montez Sweat would make that defensive front pretty damn good in Chicago. Pick number 10. Where are we going?
So, got the Jets. We've also, built a pretty young offense. And I think they get even younger here, replacing their tight end and picking up Brock Bowers. I mean, he's been a monster in college. You get him next to a veteran quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, if he's healthy and not on drugs and not the vice president.
All 3 are very possible. Yeah.
You get him mixed in with this young offense, he's going to get some targets. He's going to get some red zone targets and some touchdowns at that, too. And I have high hopes for him this year if he goes to the Jets.
Brock Bowers would be the first tight end since Kyle Pitts to go in the top 10, and I think he's a guy who's deserving of it. Very good player. Reminds a lot of people of George Kittle. And if you're telling me you get to add a George Kittle-like player to an offense that already has Aaron Rodgers, Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, and Mike Williams, I'll take that every day of the week. For me, here we are at 11. We traded that number 5 pick to Minnesota, so the Chargers are here at 11. And for them, this is a great scenario for them because there's a guy you could consider with the 5th pick, and he's still here at 11. And for me, that's Talise Fuaga. I think he's a fantastic right tackle, and they've already got Rashawn Slater on that line, so lock up the exterior of that offensive line with a guy like Fuaga. Super athletic, can protect the passer, can also run block. He showed up really big in the Senior Bowl, which kind of popped eyes and then made them go back and look at the film, and you were like, man, this guy really holds up with the top tackles on the board like Joe Alt and Fashanu. So I think he kind of fits what Jim Harbaugh does. I think he's a really darn good player, and the Chargers would be lucky to get him at 11.
Yeah, that plays out pretty perfectly for the Chargers, being able to trade back and still getting one of the top 3-4 offensive linemen in this draft, a guy that really showed out at the Senior Bowl, of course. At the 12th pick, I really wanted this pick because I thought that being the Denver Broncos have fallen in love with Bo Nix, maybe they trade back. And the only team that I could see that would be willing to trade up is the Arizona Cardinals. Go in, get a defensive lineman that we talked about last week, has more than enough ability to be a generational talent in Jared Verse. You just get a guy that can do it all. If you need him to play a 3 technique, he's big enough. If you need him to just rush the passer, we know what that looks like, especially being LSU fans. But yeah, I mean, if anybody's going to move up to this spot, it's going to be to get either one of these top corners that we've yet to see come off the board, or the gap between Verse and Dallas Turner. The gap between those two guys and the rest of the edge rushers in this draft is pretty massive in my opinion, but I'm also not a fan of Liatu Latu, which we all know is going to go in the first round.
True. Yeah. Question here before we move on. Corners are slipping down the board. Do you see this happening in real life? I mean, for me, I'll give my opinion. I do, because I think when you look at the corners, there's probably like 4 or 5 of them who are all in the same-ish tier. I mean, you got the 2 guys out of Alabama and Arnold and McKinstry. You've got Quinyon Mitchell, and then Nate Wiggins, who are all kind of, I mean, I wouldn't say they're all ranked at the same level, but they're all within the same tier on a typical year. So maybe people aren't really trying to pick favorites here, and they're letting the board fall how it may. So pick 13 here, Mustang. Do we see the first corner go off the board?
It was heavily considered when I was going through it, making my picks. But when you're the Raiders and you have nothing going right, you can't draft a good corner to save your life.
They haven't had the best luck. That is true.
I think you want a guy who you can draft and make him a foundation. Yeah, you're going to have a lot riding on him, but I do think he'll be successful. They have drafted good in this position before. I'm going to go Big O Fashanu.
Yeah, I feel like the cornerback slippage has a lot more to do with team need than it does the talent of those players. We all know that all 5 of those guys are going to play an incredible amount of reps as a rookie. We know that a lot of them have the talent to be day one starters, be shutdown corners in this league, and it's not necessarily their fault that they're slipping, whereas all these teams really need offensive tackles and really need quarterbacks. And so it just happens this way this year.
Yeah, especially with a lot of teams, kind of you see them trading off a lot of pieces, or they might still have a few stars here and there, but they don't have that structure, that full structure of a solid team. And I think the Raiders fit into that perfectly. They're kind of caught in between this rebuild and this weird status. And I think that getting an offensive tackle like Fashanu can, like I said, be a foundation for the future.
Yeah, when you're picking in that like 10 to 17, 10 to 18 range, it's always like you're not necessarily bad enough to get one of the best players on the board, but you're also not good enough to be making the playoffs. So you kind of have to really hone in on what do we need. And, I mean, if the Raiders are looking there and Fashanu's still on the board at 13, a guy who earlier in the offseason was looked at as a top 10 player, then it's hard not to pull the trigger there. For me, I'm going to go with my second trade of the day. This was one that Rebo kind of suggested to me. I already had it in mind of somebody trading here because the corners are slipping. And then he mentioned to me that my Detroit Lions are a team who could definitely look to move up and go ahead and grab.
Just give them the whole
draft.
Just
give them the whole draft. I mean,
the whole draft.
It's not my decision what they trade.
I don't know how they'll get it done, but they'll get it done.
They'll get it done. They need a corner, without a doubt. That was probably their weakest position last year. I mean, it's part of the reason they didn't end up making the Super Bowl last year is they couldn't contain that 49ers offense in the second half. So, for me, it makes sense for the Saints to trade back as a Saints fan. The top tier of offensive tackles are gone. The top two edge rushers are gone. Your corner's not necessarily the biggest need, so you find a way to get some extra picks and have a team move up. And for me, that team's the Lions to move up, grab the top corner on the board, in my opinion, Terrion Arnold. I think he can do literally anything you want a corner to do. I think while he may not be a Sauce Gardner or Patrick Surtain Jr., he's a very, very good player, and I think he's gonna show his mark, and Detroit's counting on him to do so in this draft.
Yeah, I feel like Detroit would move up here because the next pick is the Colts, who could very well go corner. And personally on my board, and what I think that front office people will look at is the film, and Kool-Aid McKinstry jumps off the page here. I think he's by far the number one corner in this draft for me, but we are going predictive. Terrion Arnold did have a better season this year statistically. But yeah, it's a match made in heaven. You get one of the top two corners in this draft. Colts need corner.
Cornerback duo from Alabama go back-to-back at 14-15. I mean, that's a pretty cool little thing for them if that really happens. Probably I would assume two players who are pretty good friends, know each other really well, go back-to-back 14-15 right in the middle of the first-round draft. 16, Seattle Seahawks. Who we got?
This is another one where, like, they're in that weird era, but I think their need is on the defensive side of the ball to me. I think their offense has been, over the past few years, more overpowered than people thought they were going to be. I mean, Geno Lock was slinging.
Geno Lock.
Combine both of them.
Yeah, there we go.
Geno
combo.
Geno Smith.
And now they have your boy.
Geno Smith was slinging that thing. Receivers are sturdy. O-line has been more than capable of holding their own the past few seasons. So I think you switch up, go to the defensive side of the ball, get that those defensive numbers up, some more pressure on the quarterback.
Bro's struggling right now.
I'm going through it. I'm going to go Latu. There, I'm done.
Biggest question with Latu is the health, obviously. Had to medically retire at his first place. I think it was Washington, if I remember correctly. And then had to move on to UCLA, where they let him play. Had a pretty good year. He's going to be a first-round pick. The question is, where does he go? He could go anywhere from the 10 to 12 range all the way to the end of the round. So we'll see where he goes, depending on the medicals. Latu could be a very good player. No Rebo Hustle doesn't love him. But he's definitely the top of the next tier of edge rushers after Verse and Turner. Jacksonville here, I think if he's on the board, you put the draft card in before you even hear the last pick of Quinyon Mitchell. Jacksonville brought in Ryan Nielsen from the Falcons. We remember Ryan Nielsen from the Saints days, where he plays a ton of press man coverage. Toledo ran mostly press man coverage. Quinyon Mitchell, 4.3 speed, plays really good man, can shadow a receiver. I think it's a perfect match made in heaven, and Quinyon Mitchell just looks right in a Jacksonville jersey, in my opinion. So, I mean, if he's there for you, take Quinyon Mitchell at 17.
Yeah, I feel like the Jags at 17, they're sticking and picking cornerback. Regardless of who's there, they're going to take the top one. and they're going to shoot it because that was their weakest point past I don't know how many years.
Yeah.
And speaking of the weakest point, at 18, the Bengals continue to reinforce offensive line. J.C. Latham, one of the best tackles in this draft, a guy that blew up the combine, and a guy that's technically sound, even though he wears a back plate. You got to respect his game. And but I think that would be a perfect pick for them, a guy that holds his own in pass protection, holds his own in run blocking, a guy that you really can't go wrong with.
Even though he wears a back plate is my favorite quote.
Dude, I hate that. I hate an offensive lineman with a back plate, but J.C. Latham, if he wants, he can do whatever he wants to do, dude.
Yeah, he's a really good player, and I think really the only reason there's a knock on him is because he's a strict right tackle.
Because he wears a back plate.
No, because he's a strict right tackle.
Yes, because he's a strict right tackle.
If he were a left tackle, or if he had shown some versatility left to right side or exterior to interior, I think he'd be right up there with the other three.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's hard to do that playing at Bama because if you find a position and you're able to start in that position,
why move?
Why? Yeah, exactly. Why?
Yeah.
Why
and
ever
also,
even risk it?
Also, you've got 4 other guys on that line who are probably just as highly recruited as you were because they can get so many guys in there. So Latham found his spot, and I mean, we know the history of Alabama players in the NFL. I think they're either 1 or 2 on active rosters every week, and most of them are pretty high-level players. So J.C. Latham falling to a team that just lost their right tackle just makes sense.
Yeah. And then with this next pick, it's almost like the stars align because you have the Rams up, you have Byron Murphy there. Aaron Donald just retired. Why not be able to get an immediate replacement and plug and play him? He's one of those guys that I feel will get into whatever roster he makes it onto and immediately make an impact game 1.
And the Rams fit for him has got to be like one of the best because you get the same guys that have trained with Aaron Donald. You got a guy that really has good hands. And the one thing that everybody has preached and praised for Aaron Donald has been his work with his hands. And so therefore, why don't you just continue to make this guy better?
Yeah. I mean, Byron Murphy fits that Aaron Donald mold. He can. I don't know if he's necessarily the pass rusher that Aaron Donald was, but he's a great run stopper. He can put pressure on the quarterback. Smaller guy, highly technical and highly athletic. So it all, like you said, the stars do align. For me, if this were a who would I pick draft, I would go with Brian Thomas Jr. here. But because we're trying to be predictive, I'm going to go Amarius Mims, tackle out of Georgia. Mike Tomlin loves Georgia players, especially big.
Darnell Washington,
and I think their left tackle or their right tackle. I think Braxton Jones is their other tackle from Georgia last year.
Yes.
They took him, and they loved him, and he played really well. So to just follow up on that, you get Amarius Mims to play the other side. I mean, it just makes sense. That's how they like to build their team. You have Arthur Smith coming in as OC. You got Russell Wilson and Justin Fields back there at quarterback now that you got both of them. And you're going to need to protect them. I know you kind of want a playmaker as a weapon here, but I think there's a lot more depth at receiver than a lot of people think. You can pick them up in rounds 2 and 3, and there's still even people out there in free agency. So for me, you take your premier position, get your 5th-year option on offensive tackle, and the top one on the board, Amarius Mims.
Yep. And at 21, Dolphins agree that they also really need offensive line help with Robert Hunt leaving. You got a guy like Troy Faitanu who is a Swiss Army knife as an offensive lineman.
The Taysom Hill of O-line.
Yes, can play.
I would say.
I'd say 4 out of the 5. Would I want him to start every day at left tackle? Maybe not, but he is a mauler and he is not afraid of any matchup. And so I'm more than happy to replace Robert Hunt with a young talent like Troy Faitanu.
Yeah, my favorite offensive lineman in the draft. I've said it multiple times, and I'll keep saying it. I think he might end up being the best one, just because he is a run blocker, a mauler in the run game who has outstanding lateral quickness. And I know you're a big combine guy. When I watched the combine, Fautanu stood out the absolute most to me. And he has, like you said, 4 out of 5 position versatility on that offensive line for an offensive line who could use 4 out of the 5 positions.
Yeah, and these few picks up here, like the 20 to 25 26, 27-ish range are all these teams that are outside looking in. So making these picks is even tougher because you know that, you're just one good player away from making that Super Bowl run or...
Yeah, like the Denver Broncos at 27.
Well, they traded, so they don't count.
This guy.
Obviously.
Some people.
But I do feel like the Dolphins getting another offensive lineman here will help them move up instead of moving back. We saw last year offensive line was probably their weakest point in their game. They were able to throw the ball well. It's still somehow because Tyreek Hill's so damn fast. And their defense played better than, I was expecting with, without having their top corners every game, this and that. I think this pick will help them make it further into the playoffs this season. But up next, the chalkest pick of the draft. It's the Eagles, and Cooper DeJean's still there. I don't need to say any more.
Okay. They just signed Reed Blankenship to a 1-year deal. I think Cooper DeJean is a better player than Reed Blankenship. I think he has a lot more versatility on a Philadelphia Eagles defense that needs that. A secondary that allowed every passing yard ever last season. So great pick there, Mustang.
Thank you.
For me, second Chargers pick, not only for me, but in this draft, after trading down with Minnesota. And like Rebo just said, stars align. Although I want this to be as predictive as possible because that's what we're trying to do in this one, there's no way you go without picking Brian Thomas Jr. I mean, 4.3 speed at 6'3", 6'4", led the NCAA in receiving touchdowns last season at LSU, across from Malik Neighbors, and had Jaden Daniels throwing him the ball. I mean, for a team that trades away Keenan Allen, for a team that loses Mike Williams and loses Austin Eckler, I mean, who do they have left on offense? Jalen Guyton,
Rashawn
Jordan
Slater.
Palmer, Rashawn Slater,
Joshua Kelly,
Zion Johnson at right guard. Like, they don't have much going on. So you get a first-round receiver who is tall, is fast, can run routes, and win 50-50 balls, and is known to catch touchdowns. When you give that to Justin Herbert and Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman at the OC, can't complain there. BT Jr. to the Chargers.
Donald Parham,
another player that the Chargers have. Man, he was excited for that one. Cowboys at 24.
Yeah, it's hard for them to not go O-line here. You just basically get dealt whatever falls to you. And Tyler Guyton's there, best offensive tackle left on the board. It's not a bad hand to get dealt, in my opinion. A guy that I feel like Oklahoma only produces run-blocking offensive tackles.
Probably a valid point.
I feel like they had the exact same guy. I can't remember.
Anton Harrison.
Yes, Anton Harrison. The exact same player, in my opinion. Two massive left and right tackles that can play both, and huge run blockers, in my opinion.
Packers, 25.
Packers. Yeah. Last year, a lot of people thought they were going to flop. They were going to get a high pick in the draft. Jordan Love turned that around. He turned on that offense. Turns out those receivers can catch sometimes.
And he's got a lot of them, too.
Yeah. I don't know. And they're all 2-3 year players.
Yep.
So I decided to flip the script, switch to the defense, and I think personally best defensive player on the board for them would be Nate Wiggins.
Very fast corner, very skilled corner. Got hurt at the combine, so he was a very light player. I think he weighed in the 170s. I think that's a big question mark for him is how will he hold up in the NFL? Yes, you have the speed and the agility, but do you have the durability to play 17 games a year? But if Nate Wiggins can stay healthy and stay on track for the Packers, that'll be a great addition to that defense. For me, my third trade of the day, because
why not?
I just like to trade. It's fun. And also, trades happen in real life. Is it easy to predict what the trades will be? Absolutely not.
Not even close.
But we know they're in there, so it's our job to just try. So for me, I have the 49ers moving up. So, yeah, San Francisco moving up The reason I have them moving up, you look at the next couple teams on the board. Denver traded back, although we know that it's not going to be a center based on what Rebo Hustle said earlier in the draft. They lose Lloyd Cushenberry. Could they use a guy like Jackson Powers-Johnson? Absolutely. Buffalo loses Mitch Morse. Although they signed Connor McGovern, Connor McGovern has played a lot of guard in his career. Could they move JPJ to center and move Connor McGovern over to take over that right guard spot? Absolutely. So, for me, you look at the 49ers offense. They have holes on the offensive line, I think, at 3 out of the 5 spots. 2 of those being interior guys, and then at right tackle as well. So you get the best offensive lineman on the board, in my opinion, and that's Jackson Powers-Johnson.
Makes sense.
But yeah, 27 Broncos. We know Sean Payton likes Bo Nix. Does he trade back in the first round to get him, or does he wait till the second? He doesn't have a second round pick, so that's why I had him trade back.
I am not the biggest Bo Nix fan. I'm not going to sit here and say I think he is a first-round talent. However, this is predictive. Denver needs a quarterback. Bo Nix has some similarities to a guy Sean Payton spent most of his career with, and Drew Brees. So is it out of the realm of possibility that Denver picks Bo Nix in the first round? Not by any means.
Yeah, I think Bo Nix is iffy to me. I do think that if he's there and the scenario does happen, I think that the Broncos will pull the trigger because they desperately need a quarterback. But, you know, he was pretty successful last year on Oregon with a very high-powered offense. But to me, his receivers did most of the work. He just threw the ball 10 yards. And we saw him in the SEC not play very well under pressure, under real defense.
Real defense.
Thank you, Pac-12.
Yeah.
But I do think that they'd pull the trigger. I think with what's left on the board, it would be their best option. Moving on to the Bills. To me, this was really between those top 3 guys you see right there. But I went with Chop Robinson because he's a dog. Bills need some edge pressure from a dog.
Yeah. He's more of a Nittany Lion, if you ask me.
He's a dog. Okay. DAWG.
I mean, very good player.
He's one of these players to me that he's gonna be picked later in the round because of all these, you know, highly scouted top names like Jared Verse, like Dallas Turner. But I think he's going to be able to play at the same level as them, if not higher.
Yeah, it's hard to look at a Penn State edge rusher and not think Micah Parsons, especially when he runs about the same speed. He plays at about the same weight, about the same height. He plays a little bit differently as far as style and being mostly an edge rusher as opposed to a stand-up linebacker like Parsons was coming out of Penn State. But Chop Robinson, good player. I think he'll go later in the first round, and the Bills are a great fit for him. For me, Saints are here at 29. If I were them, I'd just trade back again and get out of the first round completely. Get more picks, pile them up. You have a lot of spots in your team you can improve, but this is a predictive mock draft, and nothing makes more sense for the Saints than to pick an interior offensive lineman here. Graham Barton out of Duke. Played right tackle at Duke. Best offensive lineman left on the board. Probably the only one left that has a first-round grade. He's shown versatility. We have a hole at left tackle. We have a hole at left guard, and I think Graham Barton can come in and try to do his best at either spot. When you have this pick, you got to go offensive line if you're the Saints. I mean, it's really the biggest need they have. Other guys on the board who they could consider a wide receiver, maybe A.D. Mitchell or Ladd McConkey, even Keon Coleman, who they brought in for a visit, could also maybe consider edge or D-line here, but I like Graham Barton to the Saints at 29.
Yeah, this pick just makes me feel like I need to do more research on late first round to second round pick offensive linemen because I know everything there is to know about the first couple guys off the board, and then I have a couple sleepers in my back pocket that I'm waiting to launch if we ever get that far. But Graham Barton, I am not familiar with his game.
Sorry.
Happens to the best of us.
But at 30, the Ravens, they are in a spot where they can really pick best available, and you've got a starting defensive tackle in Michael Pierce who is aging, and you're more than willing to take Jerzon Newton here, who can sit a year, rehab his injury if he has to, and start next year, whether it be at the 3-tech in their defense or at nose, you get a great pass rusher, a guy that can stop the run if with some more training. I feel like he's the obvious pick here, best available, and why go wide receiver for the 14th time in a row?
Second.
Yeah. I mean, Baltimore loves to add to their defense even when they're already strong. They just signed Justin Matabike to a huge extension at D-line, but you need somebody to pair next to him. So throw Newton in there and see what he can do.
Yeah, I think with that Ravens pick, they really can't go wrong with picking any of these guys besides Michael Penix, because you're not going to replace Lamar Jackson with slower Lamar Jackson.
He's got a good point.
With this next pick with Tampa Bay, I was really thinking about taking Darius Robinson out of Mizzou. They definitely need some edge help, but I don't think they're willing to, potentially reach that far. He hasn't proven much to me. So I think they'd go with, a more notable, more worthy talent.
I see what you did there.
You like that, didn't you? Xavier Worthy's the pick for me. They have, their big guy with Mike Evans, who's getting up there in age, but he's still going to play. You have their middle guy, Chris Godwin. He's kind of their, run a drag route, run a slant. He's open in the middle of the field. That's basically what I'm saying.
Yep.
You get Xavier Worthy to add that speed receiver, get him that deep ball. Because while Mike Evans can catch the deep ball, he's getting old, he's getting slow.
Speed's not the word I would use to describe Mike Evans.
So Xavier Worthy, get their speedy receiver 3. Makes him pretty dangerous, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, Worthy didn't have a lot of production in college, but then he runs the combine record 40-yard dash, and everybody wants him in the first round now because he's just an electric player.
Speed's one of those things you can't teach.
Right.
You can teach a player to catch better. You can teach him to run routes better. You can't teach him to be faster.
Right.
Yeah, I feel like if the Bucs were to trade back to 31, the obvious mold of wide receiver would be like a Keon Coleman type, but he just ran so poorly at the combine that it's hard to see him go in the first round. And so Xavier Worthy, who did not have a bad tape and went ahead and backed up everything at the combine, it's honestly a great pick for them.
Last pick of the first round, Kansas City Chiefs. The last pick of the first round is always one of those spots where you're looking for a trade. Maybe somebody wants to move up to get a guy who they think slipped. Maybe somebody wants to get that last pick of a quarterback. Before we take this last pick, you guys know who it's going to be. Is there anybody who we didn't pick in the first round who you think is definitely going to be a first rounder?
A.D. Mitchell.
I do think A.D. Mitchell will be in the first
same
round.
name I had in mind. Is I think A.D. Mitchell's going to find his way in the first round. I don't think he's going to fall to the second.
I feel like a lot of other people are borderline.
I do feel like, if A.D. Mitchell were to make it into the first earlier, some more teams would be willing to pull the trigger on the Keon Coleman or the Ladd McConkey.
Even the Troy Franklin, if you will.
Sure.
Or if you won't.
Yeah, a little bit of a receiver run I could definitely see happen in this draft. There's a lot of highly skilled receivers out there, and a good bit of teams need receivers.
Yeah, especially these teams in the later 20s. I mean, you look at the teams who were originally here, taking out the Broncos and the Saints, looking at the Lions, and who was that, 27? Before you traded with them? The Cardinals.
Yes.
I mean, those are all teams that could use wide receivers. So you could definitely see a run going on in the late 20s of just A.D. Mitchell coming off the board, Keon Coleman, Troy Franklin, Ladd McConkey, Xavier Worthy, all those guys. The only other name I'd mention that we haven't said yet, well, we have, but just not in a positive tone, is Michael Penix Jr. I think he may be one of those guys that sneaks into the bottom of the first round with a team that wants to trade in. For me, that team is the Raiders. I think he fits what the Raiders are trying to do. And if they sit and pick there at 13 and get an offensive tackle, they could always try to package some later round picks, move up into round 1, and grab Michael Penix to head that quarterback room that already added Gardner Minshew. So that's kind of the route I would go, but I'm going to have Kansas City stick and pick here and take the last offensive lineman of what seems to be a huge offensive lineman first round, and that is Jordan Morgan out of Arizona. They haven't had the best of luck when it comes to getting a right tackle. They had Orlando Brown Jr., who ends up going to Cincinnati. They get Jawan Taylor from Jacksonville, who ends up leading the league in penalties called. So they haven't had the best of luck when it comes to right tackle. And they already have a really good interior with guys like Creed Humphrey and Tyler Smith. So I think they're set when it comes to the interior line. Add another offensive protector to that front line protecting Patrick Mahomes, and an offense that added Marquise Brown this offseason. I think everything adds up for them to just go ahead, take who they think is the best offensive lineman left available, and in my opinion, that's Jordan Morgan.
Yeah. Another team I could see that need a quarterback would be the Bucs. Yes, Baker had one of his best years last season, but we've seen Baker play. He's gone through his highs, and then shortly after, he goes through some very, very lows. So to me, he's not, as reliable. So getting a quarterback like Penix to back him up for a few years, and then, if he does what I think he'll do and fall off, why not?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of teams who we could really look at those last few spots in the first round, and we know they need either a starting quarterback or somebody to compete for that starting job. I mean, you just talked about the Bucs. I said the Raiders. We can also look at teams like the Jets with Aaron Rodgers. We don't know what's going to happen with him in the future. We don't know what's going on in Tennessee with Will Levis. We don't know what's going to happen with Daniel Jones in New York. So there's tons of teams that could really use some competition in their quarterback rooms. And I think Michael Penix is a really good player who we could see sneak into round one for a team looking for that. I think this draft, as far as prediction goes, obviously we'll hit maybe 6 picks overall because that's how it always goes.
1 and 2.
But we did our best to kind of predict what might happen come late April on that perfect Thursday night that rolls around every year. So I'm really excited for the draft. Anything else before we head out, boys?
Negative.
Nope. Negatory. Mock Draft Monday 2.0. This was our predictive mock draft. Next week, we'll come at you. Something different order. We'll make sure to shake it up from 1 and 2. So be on the lookout for next Monday. Mock Draft 3.0 will drop from the Off the Dome studio. Make sure to follow us on Twitter, or X as they're calling it nowadays, _Dome Pod. Like, comment, subscribe on Spotify and YouTube. And then, of course, follow the No Network, KNEAUX. The only way to spell it. This has been Off the Dome. I am Redfish.
I'm Rebo Hustle.
And I'm Mustang.
And we will see you next time.